Good morning, Hertfordshire, and welcome to part 2 of the Hertfordshire Forward Conference 2020. My name is Toby Fox and I'm your facilitator for 90 minutes of discussions about sustainability and delivering a cleaner, greener and more environmentally sustainable Hertfordshire. It feels like only yesterday when we were discussing recovery strategies. If you were unfortunate enough to miss that session on 23rd of September, you can watch it at the autumn conference page on the hertfordshire.gov.uk website. The video of this session will be posted there also. There's going to be one more event on the 26th of November on diversity and equality. While it's a sad consequence of COVID-19 that we can't all be together networking and catching up with colleagues and friends, I hope all this content spread over these months and these opportunities to engage with some great panels go some way to making up for the absence this year of the traditional half-day conference. Back to today and sustainability. Is Hertfordshire committed to delivering a prosperous, resilient and sustainable place to live for generations with our long-term sustainability tied to our communities? To answer that question, a broad engagement plan is in development, and this event is part of that programme. Hertfordshire Forward has gone to the trouble of assembling a superb panel for you today to address that question. In the first part of our session, Councillor Teresa Heritage, Deputy Leader of Hertfordshire County Council, and our keynote speaker, who will be joining us shortly, Bim Elfami, MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, and Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Renewable and Sustainable Energy, and member of the APPG for Climate Change, and I'll take a breath to digest that impressive array of roles, are going to talk to us about the global impacts affecting Hertfordshire, the biggest challenges facing the county, and what government expects of the County Council. And then in the second part of our session, we can look forward to some special presentations from Dr. Phil Porter, Reader in Geoscience and Geoscience Education, and Associate Dean of Education at the University of Hertfordshire, and Julia Barrett, Chief Sustainability Officer at Wilmot Dixon. And they're going to talk to us about how Hertfordshire stands at a crossroads as changes witnessed during decades of research in the high Arctic and Himalayas bear down on the county today, and how one Hertfordshire business is seizing the opportunity to make this a decisive decade, to be bold, to be innovative, and to stand at the leading edge of changes to achieve our sustainable ambitions. And you, lucky viewers, will get a chance to question our panelists on all this content when we open the floor to your questions through the Q&A function on your screens. Feel free to pose those questions throughout the session when they occur to you and to vote for them. And I'll look forward to putting the most popular questions to the panel in the final part of our session today. But first, let's set the scene with Teresa Heritage, Deputy Leader at Hertfordshire County Council. Terry, can you tell us a little about how you see the global impacts affecting Hertfordshire and the County Council's declaration of a climate emergency?
Thank you, Toby, and good morning and welcome to our New Look Hertfordshire Forward event. As Toby said, this is a series of 3 webinars organised with the help of 3Fox, so thank you, and is integral to our partnership working. Hertfordshire Forward is recognised throughout the county as a valuable forum to ensure all partners are aware of the issues of the day and to have their voices heard in our partnership solution making process. As Toby said, please do take part this morning answering the questions posed and putting your questions to us to answer. So I'm sure many of you have seen the disturbing images: raging wildfires, melting ice caps, starving children displaced by famine, and the destruction caused by flooding. These global impacts are becoming more and more frequent and are as a result of the rise in the Earth's temperature. In many instances, these impacts are in distant lands, observed through a 24-hour world lens that somehow desensitizes us to this constant barrage of crisis. In fact, this is what we are all suffering from in our daily lives: climate change, right here in Hertfordshire. For instance, this was demonstrated earlier this month on Saturday, the 3rd of October, which was the wettest day on record since 1891. The country received the greatest rainfall in any single day, beating the previous record of 25th of August 1986. Indeed, we have already received more rainfall in Hertfordshire for October than is usual for the month. Highways colleagues tell me that from the 2nd to the 4th of October, they received 336 reports about flooding and drainage matters. And to the other extreme, we have had the Environment Agency declaring drought status across the county in 2019. The Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust has told us that over the last 50 years, 76 species have become extinct in Hertfordshire, and the summers are getting hotter and longer and drying up our chalk streams. So tackling the reasons for climate change is essential. It's a global issue, but we can all be part of the solution in our own small way to make a big difference. Not least, this applies to the County Council. The County Council declared a climate emergency in July 2019, and in March this year, just before lockdown, the Cabinet approved the Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy, which sets out ambitious targets for the County Council as an organisation. Carbon neutral for our own operations by 2030, the improvement of biodiversity on our own land by 20% by 2030, and to send nothing to landfill by 2030. Our ambition is for the organisation not to be only a leader for sustainability, but also to enable and inspire others to take action too across the county. Action plans and partnership working is essential for the delivery of all these ambitions. So in November this year, a very robust set of action plans for each service in the county's council will go through the political process. I understand there are in the order of 400 individual potential actions identified by officers, these being reviewed and condensed into more digestible chunks for members to consider. Many of the actions needed will require support and partnership working. To that end, the Council is one of 12 members of the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, affectionately known as the HCCSP, together with all the 10 district and borough councils and the LEP, and hopefully the NHS will join us soon. It's a tremendously enthusiastic partnership, but it's still fairly embryonic and is still evidence gathering. But solutions around sustainable energy, clean air and improving diversity are developing. Very much like the Hertfordshire Growth Board, I hope that this partnership will become an exemplar for the delivery of a sustainable Hertfordshire. As you can see from this slide, the council's and the county's biggest challenges are around carbon emissions and diversity. As a council, our buildings and operation emit 50,000 tonnes of CO2, with schools being the biggest area for emissions, and in the county, transport and businesses being the largest source of emission with 6 million tonnes. In terms of biodiversity, the bigger challenges we have are around protecting what we already have. My thanks to the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust for sharing this slide at a recent HCCSP meeting, which reflects that since 1970, we have lost 76 species from Hertfordshire, and that nearly 8,000 species are in risk. Indeed, over the last year, the Trust tells us that it is dealing with increasing cases of ash dieback and oak processionary moth, with reported cases rising from 30 in 2019 to 678 in 2020. The county will have unprecedented growth over the next 30 years, so we must look for sustainable solutions. So I'll be interested to hear what Dr. Phil and Julia have to say about this. As I have mentioned, the County Council has been seeking to mitigate climate change for many years. This slide reflects some of the strategies that have been developed. We have our energy strategy published in 2019, which set its goals, carbon emission reducing goals of reducing 80% from a baseline in 2012-13 by 2025. The long-term ambition of achieving a net zero position for our operations too. By 2018-19, we had delivered 38% reduction in carbon emissions, and that was from the baseline for highways and non-school estates. Our energy reduction programme has seen 150 reduction measures. Included is our installation of LED street lighting across the county. The park night lighting policy combined with LED street lights has led to a 60% reduction in carbon emissions and financial savings for the county council. We're also assessing the feasibility of developing a solar farm and large-scale battery storage on county land. These will all help us achieve more secure renewable energy supplies. We are exploring the potential to enhance the existing woodland portfolio of our rural estate. 4,000 trees have been planted near London Colney, and we have funding for 37,000 new trees near Potters Bar, approved by the Forestry Commission. We have the A120 Little Haddon Bypass scheme, where a further 10,000 trees are being planted, with a 39,000 further planned in the current contract. So we're already doing quite a lot. Last but not least, we are mindful of the human impact of climate change. We are developing our strategy. When developing our strategy, we look toward the UN Sustainable Goals and decided to concentrate initially on the green and environmental targets, cognizant of the existence of partnerships in the county that will monitor and set targets for social aspects. Learning from the COVID pandemic will enable us to fundamentally reassess what is required to tackle the scale of transformation required to prepare for climate change. The crisis has shone a spotlight on the impact of equality on health outcomes and the important role of prevention. One partnership that will help the county's social response to climate change is the Health and Wellbeing Board. Its strategy is being reviewed next year, and we'll look at the wider determinants of health around equalities, good homes, clean air, neglect and poverty. And the LEP skills strategy will look towards sustaining jobs, skills, training and resilient businesses. So that's a whistle-stop tour around what the County Council is up to. But as I have said, we all need to do this together. Early in the new year, we will be engaging with many different groups, the public, landowners, business and farmers, for instance, about our strategy. There will be resident surveys, virtual webinars, workshops and a citizen lab, a platform where residents can find information about what the county is doing and the progress. There'll be community workshops and of course engagement with schools and colleges. Today is the real start of our conversation with Hertfordshire about what we can all do to create a sustainable county. I know that every resident, business and organisation cares about the place in which they live. I'm looking forward to hearing from our other panellists, and especially the last session this morning. I lead on children, young people and families and sit on the Health and Wellbeing Board and the County Emotional Wellbeing Board. So hearing from our future generation is close to my heart. At the County Council, the voice of children and young people is really important. Climate change and eco-anxiety is atop of their concerns, together with mental health. Our youth services will be developing ways to ensure that their voices are heard, as they are the generation that will be most greatly impacted. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Terry. Thank you very much indeed. So we've got some great material there, 400 actions required of council officers. We've got a wide range and the longevity of sustainability strategies in Hertfordshire and collaborations such as the Health and Wellbeing Board and the adoption of sustainable development goals by the county. Viewers, the engagement has just begun, as Terry mentioned, and if you'd like to start putting questions to our panel on any of those matters, then feel free to fire them through now. We've already had a question about the timing of consultation, Terry. Did you say that was going to start early next year?
We're going through the political, well, this is a start. There have been surveys out there. Once we've gone through the political process, which is in November on action plans, it'll all be approved, go to Cabinet. So hoping the end of this year, but you know, who knows with COVID how things can be processed quickly. But if not the end of this year, definitely the start of next year.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, David Royal. I hope that answers your question. Viewers, keep them coming. While we turn to Bim Afalami, who MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, who I'm delighted to say has been able to join us. Bim, thank you very much for sparing the time to be part of the Hertfordshire Forward conference this morning. You're going to be telling us a little bit about your role as a local MP and within the all-party parliamentary groups that you're a member of, and the situation, the climate change and the government response, and what we need to do in Hertfordshire. So let's hand the stage over to you to give us some information on that, Bim.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for joining. And it's a pleasure to follow Teresa Heritage and all the good work that she's been doing, that she's described. What I'd first of all like to say is I'm chair of an all-party parliamentary group, and for those who called PRASEG, which is it's an acronym for the all-party parliamentary group on renewable and sustainable energy. Now, there are lots of all-party parliamentary groups. What they are is basically all-party groups, so they cannot exist unless you've got a range of all different parties, but they are focused on a particular area that is cross-sectoral, an area of general interest. It could be an all-party group on Egypt, or on fighting obesity, or indeed on renewable and sustainable energy. But my all-party parliamentary group is the oldest one that exists in Parliament. It's actually one of the best funded, one of the best supported. It's one of the few times when I get on very well with Scottish nationalists. So there is a real consensus behind a lot of what I'm going to say and the work that's going on in Parliament. The first thing that everybody needs to know is this is not an issue that is sharply dividing parties. And as a result, I think there's a lot of collaborative work going on both at national and local level. One of the big roles that we have in the next 12 months for PRASEG is we've been chosen by Alok Sharma, who's president of COP26, and by the Cabinet Office as being the official parliamentary liaison for COP26. We will be the vehicle through which MPs of all different persuasions will be able to feed into that process, get briefings, deal with how they feel the UK government or indeed the international situation is. And so we're going to have a very, very important convening role for all parties to do that. But I don't want to bore you by talking about almost very, very macro things, because I think we could all spend a lot of time talking about all the important things that the world needs to do to deal with climate change that we know. I want to bring it a little bit closer to home. And as I was thinking about today, this particular phrase came up to me, and it was probably in one of the various bits of paper that I saw. And it basically said, we need to create a cleaner, greener, and more environmentally sustainable environment in the county. And I thought to myself, okay, what does that look like? What does that look like, not just in my constituency? And, I'm not going to be, there are other constituencies in Hertfordshire, though obviously mine is the best. There are lots of others, and mine is of a particular character. It's fairly rural, though with some reasonably large towns in Hitchin and in Harpenden. And so our challenges are different, for example, in Stevenage. But I do feel that overall there are some things that all of us can take away, and that how the government can work with the county council and local government in particular. The first is, it's clear to me that electric vehicles are the future. Everybody knows that, the government's accepted that. We've got a date by which we've said we are not going to permit the sale of petrol and diesel cars. That date may well be brought forward in due course, though it hasn't been brought forward yet. And what I want to see us doing, and I'm doing work on this in my own constituency, but again, it's a broader point. We need to increase and expand the number and the effectiveness of electric car vehicle charging points across the county, not just on trunk roads, but in towns and villages as well. Because unless you can give people the sense that wherever they drive around, they can get it charged, then they will resist buying them. So that's one thing we need to do. But something that local government can directly do is procure more. I think it has started to happen, but I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, more electric fleets of taxis and buses. And buses may well end up being hydrogen buses, but we need to directly procure that so that we can start moving this dial forward on electric vehicles. And indeed, the emissions that come from buses are so much greater per head than necessarily than for a car traveling, rather not per head, than for a car traveling the same distance. So I think it's very important that we try and do that. A second thing, and Teresa Heritage has already mentioned this in her remarks, green spaces and planting trees. Now, planting trees is very nice. Everybody likes planting trees, and we should keep doing more of it. But we also need to protect our green space, because dealing with the environment is not just about climate change. It's about a greener environment. It's about a nicer environment for people to live in. It's about air quality being improved. And so having green space, and indeed it makes people fitter, they exercise more, they feel happier. Making sure we protect our green spaces does need to be actually at the core of how we move forward, because there is absolutely no point having this wonderful county if we do not protect our very, very precious green spaces, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, we are still, between 30 and 60, 50, 60 miles from London. So I think that's very important. And this leads me on to another point. It hasn't really, if it has come up, sorry, I joined slightly late, so I may have missed it. House building. How we think about building new homes in the county. The county has to build some impossible number of new homes that I'm sure has been mentioned. It's some sort of terrifying number. I wouldn't focus on that. What I'd focus on is how we build. So what are the materials going to be like? How effective are they going to be in terms of energy efficiency? Are we using BRE down near Watford, which is a national resource in terms of expertise in building materials? Are we using BRE properly? Bearing in mind, that's in our own county. And when we do build the houses, how do we build sustainable communities? Now, I say sustainable communities. Sustainable is probably one of the most overused words in government and politics. Everything's sustainable. Everything is sustainable. But what I mean by sustainable in the terms of housing is sustainable communities, which are communities that are effectively self-sufficient for most things. That means that as many people as possible work in the community, shop in the community, their kids go to school in the community. And if we can achieve that, that has positive environmental impacts, not just from a climate change perspective, as I mentioned, but also in terms of the fact that people will be healthy, they'll be walking more, they'll be cycling more, they'll be getting around in their communities. So I would stress that as we embark on another round of house building, that's always politically, with a small p, always politically tricky, because frankly, though people always deny it, they don't really want houses built near their green field, near where they live. They prefer it to happen somewhere else. And anybody who denies that political problem just isn't, being very honest. So it is going to be difficult. But as we do that, let us try and focus on building, a bit like how Letchworth was built by Ebenezer Howard, 110, 120 years ago, is let's try and build sustainable communities. So I think that is important. Another thing I'd just like to touch on just at the end is about clean air. And clean air is one of the few things that unites us all in this world and unites us all in the county. Everybody wants cleaner air, and that has health benefits, as we all know. There's lots of good work that's happened strategically in understanding that, for example, around schools is probably where we should have clean air zones. Let's stop cars parking and running their engines just outside schools, for example. I've done some work in my constituency with this and have written to all the heads of my constituency and are working with several of them to implement sort of clean air zones around their schools. But it's one thing saying that's the strategy. The question is, how do you do it? And the problem with it is in lots of places, less in my constituency because of the nature of it, but imagine if you were in Watford or in Stevenage, for example, or in Hemel Hempstead, there isn't the space. If you stop people parking, you had a clean air zone outside of school, it would make things difficult from a traffic perspective. So we do need to work much more closely and more effectively about designing these so that we can, and it may require traffic redesign as well to help do that. And that also goes for 20-mile-an-hour speeding limits outside or in areas where you have clusters of schools or lots of kids, because I think that we all recognize that, of course, it doesn't make sense to have 20-mile speeding limits where there isn't much pedestrian, where there aren't many pedestrians. But I think when you have lots of young kids it is broadly sensible to do that through small villages and through parts of towns where you have lots of schools. So that, again, isn't just an environmental impact, but it's actually a positive impact for the way that we live our lives today, which we shouldn't forget. And I think one of the problems, as somebody who's very passionate about making sure that we can transition to a net zero future whilst maintaining our high standard of living, I'm very passionate about that. I do think it's very important that we don't allow the sort of, what I might slightly pompously regard as sort of an environmental movement to become po-faced, to say it's all about 50 years time, or it's all about 100 years time. Now, of course it is about 50 years time and 100 years time, but it's also about living better today. So let us make sure, as we communicate and work with people, that we make sure that people recognize the benefits today of cycling more, the benefits today of our green spaces, the benefits today to poorer people in particular of having more energy efficient homes, because it means they spend less money on their energy as we move to a more renewable energy future. So that's how I think about it. Yes, it's about tomorrow, but it's also about improving the lives of our residents today. And you know, I'm very, very happy to be here. And I wouldn't, it'd be remiss of me not to mention some of the good work county council's also been doing, because the difficulty sometimes when you're a county council is that you do a lot of good work and people don't notice it. And they do a lot of good work. They put the frameworks in place. They work very well with the districts and boroughs. And in fact, that work has been going on more effectively in recent years, even since I became an MP in the heady days of 2017, when all we had to worry about was Brexit. The county council has reduced carbon emissions from street lighting by over 30% over the last 6-7 years. It's working with the district and borough councils to reuse, recycle, or compost over 50% of waste. Again, these are not sexy topics. You know, nobody goes to bed excited about waste disposal, but it matters if you're actually trying to deal with some of these intractable issues just as much as the exciting work that I want to be doing in my constituency, that I'm doing on improving cycle routes or improving electric car charging points and all those things that are more accessible. This nuts and bolts work also really matters. The county council's been doing it very, very well, of course, and Theresa Heritage has been at the forefront of that.
Fantastic.
So that's it from me, and I'll stop yabbering and ask me questions.
It's terrific to hear you being so supportive, and also to hear you emphasising the immediacy of what's being done, but also what can be done, and to realise the scale of the ambitions. You know, that electric charging points are coming, that green space and clean air is coming, more green space and protected green space and better air, and that homes are going to be more sustainable and communities are going to be more sustainable as we are building them. And I know that some of that is going to play into the hands of our panelists. I had the honour of introducing Julia Barrett, Wilmot Dixon's sustainability strategy a few weeks ago, and I'm sure Julia is going to address some of those points later.
I've got several constituents who work with Wilmot Dixon, so they're a wonderful company.
Fantastic. And viewers, you can get involved too, because we're going to be polling you shortly after the next couple of presentations to see how close to home you feel some of this is and what you're doing about it. So that's coming up after the next presentations. But let's go to those now. The Himalayas may seem like a long way away, and a lot of aspects of climate change are happening elsewhere. But what Dr. Phil Porter is going to explain to us now is how those things that are happening in the high Arctic and the Himalayas are currently impacting Hertfordshire, and how the county now stands at a crossroads. Over to you, Dr. Phil.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm a glacier scientist, somebody who looks at snow and ice, and I've worked in the high Arctic and the Himalayas for the last, well, more than 25 years. And clearly during that period, I've witnessed some extraordinarily profound changes in both regions. And as Toby has just mentioned, I'm going to try and link this to Hertfordshire, but I'm not going to focus on the science. You might be relieved to hear for reasons that I'll explain later in the presentation. But most of the work I do is in Svalbard, the Svalbard archipelago, which is circled here on this Google Earth image. It's a high Arctic location. We're a long way north, as you can see, similar latitude to the north coast of Greenland. And what we're seeing is some really profound changes. This was the temperature record broken this summer in Longyearbyen, the main settlement, 21.7 degrees C. This is a high Arctic location. That wasn't a one-off temperature. There were several days before that in the upper teens, low 20s, and several days after that. And that's been an increasing trend towards temperatures in the teens in the high Arctic during the summer months. So some really profound changes going on. And the Himalayas, well, why are we concerned about the Himalayas? Well, if we look at where the major Asian rivers rise, the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau, an absolutely vital water resource for a fair proportion of our planet's population. Now, there's water aplenty at the moment as we experience what's called the deglaciation discharge dividend as runoff and meltwater production increases in response to melt. But come mid-century, we're likely to see runoff from these glaciers dwindling and a consequent reduction in river flows. Now, why should that worry us here in Hertfordshire? Why should we be concerned about the Arctic and what's going on there? Well, what happens in the Arctic and what happens in the Himalayas doesn't stay in the Arctic and the Himalayas. We import a large amount of our food here in the UK, and these Himalayan rivers feed some of the world's most agriculturally productive zones and imports of products such as cotton, for example. So this is a global issue, not just a regional one. And in terms of the high Arctic, what happens in the Arctic climate-wise influences climate, weather and extreme events here in the UK and indeed in Hertfordshire. So what's happening in Hertfordshire? Well, this is the Central England temperature record. This is the longest instrument record of temperature anywhere in the world. And as you can see, we're on an upwards trajectory. And in terms of what that holds for Hertfordshire, well, hotter, drier summers, as Terry has already mentioned, and warmer, milder, wetter, warmer, hotter summers and warmer and wetter winters. This is the Met Office prediction for the 25th of July 2019, prediction of 39 degrees C. We didn't quite reach 39. You may recall 38.7 degrees C was recorded in Cambridge, and that is an all-time record for the UK. But I'm going to stop the science there. We are the county of opportunity. I was born and brought up in Hertfordshire. I've spent most of my working life here. It's certainly afforded me many opportunities, and I always feel, a certain homecoming whenever I see this sign on the borders of our county. But we do stand very much at a crossroads at present, and I'm going to focus on transport and housing development. Because with those two sectors of our society and economy, we have a choice to make right now. Do we take the easy route and continue down a business as usual pathway in terms of housing development and transport infrastructure? Or do we take the harder route, which requires the sorts of difficult decisions and the policy changes which both Bim and Terry have alluded to? Because, of course, the further down easy street we go, the harder it is to get back onto the right pathway. And that is the real issue. So I'm focusing on housing and transport because those are two areas where decisions we make today lock us into either a high emissions scenario or a lower emissions scenario. And I'd just like to highlight some of the issues as I see them, coming at this as a scientist and seeing what's going on in the Arctic on a year-by-year basis, and then coming back to Hertfordshire and looking at some of the decision-making processes. Let's look at some direct quotes from planning documents, which are freely available on the planning portal. We see sustainable travel plans. I hope you'll excuse my slight cynicism with the inverted commas over the word sustainable. But if you look at some of these plans which are being signed off by local authorities, they are rather optimistic, and you will see the words encourage, promote, maybe, possibly, options, etc. And so these are just a few direct quotes. The potential to walk and cycle from the development to meet everyday needs would provide opportunities for future occupiers to opt for carbon neutral opportunities to travel. public transport operators being liaised with towards the possibility of providing reduced cost travel. Well, are these travel plans really aligned with our declared climate emergency, which local authorities, as Terry has mentioned, have declared across the country? These sorts of quotes are not unique to Hertfordshire. This could be any residential development across the UK if you dig into its sustainable transport plan. And you'll also find utopian images such as the one here. This is from a Bedfordshire planning application which has been approved. The cars all parked up in their driveways, not on the roads, and the residents cycling and walking to work. Now that is a fantastic vision for the future and one which I would strongly support. But I have to say, we've been here before. If we look at the development of Stevenage, the most amazing network of cycle pathways and pedestrian footways, but chronically underused. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the private car reigns supreme. Certainly if you've driven south on the A1 during rush hour or vice versa, you'll know all about Junction 7 and the issues there. So I have to question some of these decisions in planning applications because, of course, the reality, just on the border here, obviously, is that the private car does reign supreme with associated carbon emissions. Obviously, electric vehicles do offer a future, but there's the congestion issue to think of. So this is Ardsley Station pre-COVID on a normal working day, absolutely jam-packed. And this is before the multiple developments in the Shefford-Stotfold corridor, which are coming on stream and are planned. So we've got a serious issue here, but also a great opportunity to make the right decisions. And here's an extract from the Highover Farm development documentation in Hitchin. Are these really ambitious targets for shifting people from private cars to walking and cycling? 1%, 2% modal shifts. And I find it quite depressing to see quotes such as the one at the foot of this page, pretty much accepting that traffic congestion and capacity issues will happen. And so therefore, developments such as this one will not add significantly to the problem. That seems to me, a rather negative attitude and some very unambitious statistics if we're serious about both the housing crisis, but also the climate crisis which faces us. And I'll leave you to dig around yourselves in the publicly available documentation on residential developments to look at the extent to which solar panels and other technologies, ground source heat pumps, are being made mandatory. You might be rather surprised at the lack of such technologies being built into housing developments presently, not just in Hertfordshire, but across the UK. And I put this cartoon up because this is why I've not really spoken about the science. I do wonder if the microphone is on, which I'm sure you can all relate to in the current world with online delivery. It's rather wearying to be delivering bad news from the Arctic year after year after year, and then seeing relatively limited responses. But let's look at the wider picture, a very quick thought experiment to finish on. The population of the planet, 7.7 billion. I'm aged 50. Well, I'm a little bit older than that, but let's keep the maths simple. 1 degree C above pre-industrial temperatures. If I make it to 80, 9 billion of us on the planet. On the business as usual strategy, which is where we're currently heading, 1.5 to 2.5 degrees of warming by mid-century. If I'm lucky enough to get a letter from the Queen, 9 to 10 billion people, and I'm going to have a very warm retirement on current trajectories. So the future is closer than we think. And why am I talking about population? Well, it's the elephant in the room, and it would take a very brave politician to discuss rethinking societal norms around family size and population growth, but it's a very serious issue. But let's think about the child today, and we suddenly see the end of the century is rather closer. Just age 30, we're already at mid-century on current trajectories, business as usual scenario, 1.5 to 2.5 degrees C of warming. If that person lives to a perfectly expectable lifespan, age 80, 11 billion people, 3.5 to 6.5 degrees of warming. by century end. Suddenly the end of the century seems rather closer than we might think. So we have a great opportunity now to avoid that worst case scenario. We are the county of opportunity. Let's grasp this opportunity to truly build sustainable properties and link in with genuinely sustainable transport infrastructure. And let's deal with this housing crisis and our climate crisis as one rather than separate entities, and truly build a more sustainable Hertfordshire for the residents of our wonderful county of opportunity.
Dr. Porter,
And I'll
thank
end
you.
there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That is a fantastic presentation. And I was going to say, you've injected a bit of realism to the conversation in the sense that you've made it seem very real, but perhaps also an appropriate level of skepticism. We've been talking about ambitions, we've been talking about what we're aiming to achieve, but we have to be realistic about the resistance to change, the difficulty of implementing the level of change that's needed in order to make our communities truly sustainable. There's a sense in which, when we were talking earlier, there's a sense in which Dr. Porter is becoming tired of saying the same things over and over again to little or no effect. And this message has been fairly clear for a few years now, but it's taken a long time for us to react in practical ways. However, there is a company that is taking heed of this, and it's a delight to introduce the Chief Sustainability Officer of Wilmot Dixon, Julia Barrett, to tell us about Wilmot Dixon's walking the walk, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk with its program to be net zero carbon by 2030. Julia, let's hand the stage over to you to hear a bit more about that.
Thanks very much, Toby. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know us, and thanks to BIM for the shout out earlier, Wilmot Dixon's a privately owned contracting and interior fit out group working across England and Wales. We've got a turnover of about £1.3 billion. We've got around 2,000 staff, and at any one time we have between 130 and 150 building sites across the country. And we're headquartered at Letchworth in the striking Spirella building. As a family-owned company, we've always sought to do the right thing, right back from when we were formed back in 1852. And in fact, our first job was to build a well at Wimpole Hall for the princely sum of £1, using local skills and labour. Sustainability really is at the heart of our vision and values. And we are privileged to have been recognised with 3 Queen's Awards for Enterprise, for Sustainable Development in 2014 and 2019, and for Social Mobility in 2018. And although the term sustainability was only defined in 1987, and as Phil has indicated, it's about meeting the needs of today without compromising the needs of future generations. Until that point, back in 1987, I guess we just called it doing the right thing. And when I speak to our people, I prefer to use the John Elkington model that might be more familiar to you, looking at the intersection between social, economic and environmental, or as WWF put it, people, planet and profit. It's really simple, and it allows people to see that solving a problem or meeting a need to address one of the elements can often yield benefits in the others. And of course, the holy grail is to have the intersectionality of all 3. Now, we've had a sustainability strategy since 2013, and we've been net zero carbon or carbon neutral in our own operations since 2012. We've more than doubled our energy efficiency and slashed our carbon emissions. And now we only buy natural, renewable electricity with no nuclear for our sites and offices. And I would estimate over the last 10 years, we've saved in excess of something like £15 million over that period. We've doubled our turnover and we don't spend any more on fuel by improving our fuel efficiency. And over a similar period, well, since 2012, really, we've saved in excess of £10 million by being more efficient with our resources and reducing our waste. Sustainability really has helped us become more efficient, win new work and improve our products. It's also helped us develop new skills, knowledge, and it's helped us attract new talent, particularly those of the millennial generation and younger. So why, if it makes good business sense to us, do other businesses not do the same? Well, I think for many it's a big, complicated scientific issue. It's 10 years away, and frankly, it's human nature that today always trumps tomorrow. For many, I think they feel helpless and that they can't do anything, and that anything that they do will be insignificant in the global scheme of things. But also, I think the narrative has changed more in recent years. And as Phil highlighted with some of his graphs, at the beginning of this century, climate change records were tumbling year on year, and the frequency and severity of extreme weather events increased massively. And Terry's pictures really brought that to life for Hertfordshire, even, in the last month. In 2015, you might recall, COP24 was held in Paris, and for the very first time, world leaders, business leaders, and global personalities agreed that we needed to tackle man-made climate change by reducing global carbon emissions. Not arguing about whether it was happening, but we needed to do something and limit climate change to well below 2 degrees. In 2018, this was followed up by the UN's own Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that actually decided we needed to make a bigger change and even faster by limiting global climate change to less than 1.5 degrees by 2030. And only last year, yes, it was only a year, we saw the growth of the youth movement, the school strikes, and the inimitable Greta Thunberg. I felt the world has woken up. In response to this, we as a business are increasingly being asked to demonstrate our sustainability and social value credentials when we bid for work. And then in turn, because 80% of what we spend goes through our supply chain partners, we're asking them to demonstrate the same values and behaviours to us. So I would highlight that we're finding more than ever doing the right thing can help you win work, can help you save money, can help you support the environment, both locally and globally. My advice to business, and you all as members of the local strategic partnership and other stakeholders, is support them, encouraging them, get them to do something. Don't try and be perfect, just get started. For example, we started off by focusing on our own energy bills. We realised we spent in 3 areas: offices, transport and building sites. We looked at our bills, how much we spent, what our tariffs were, where we emitted the most carbon. Our quick and easy actions were changing our electricity tariffs and moving to renewable suppliers, drastically reducing our diesel usage as it's really inefficient and very polluting, both in air quality and carbon dioxide terms. We looked to eliminate any out of hours energy usage. Yes, it is that simple. And of course, reducing business mileage. And we've made massive progress on this. But then we started to look at our supply chain emissions, the emissions created by the materials and suppliers that help us build our building projects. And we soon realised that our own direct emissions were less than 1% of those created by our supply chain partners. So we looked for help for ourselves and became a pathfinder for the Carbon Trust's supply chain standard to better understand that impact and what we should target first. And as part of that, we actually offered free advice to our own supply chain members. We targeted those that had the highest emissions, and because we knew, or we'd evaluated, that 80% of those emissions came from only 20% of the supply chain partners. So we had a really targeted approach. And with those, on average, those that we've worked with have saved 30 to 40% on both their costs and their carbon emissions. There's loads of free advice out there. One I'll particularly highlight because I'm a board member and we're a founding partner back in 2012 is something called the Supply Chain Sustainability School. Google it. You can join as an individual person. It's free. It costs nothing. There's loads of free information, advice and support. Encourage all your friends, all of your businesses to do that. There's also the Carbon Trust. The one thing you can all really usefully do is get people talking about this issue and connecting them with this free advice and encouraging them to network and use support such as through the Chambers of Commerce and the LEP. The benefit to us is it makes our supply chain more competitive and helps them to be more financially sustainable. And BIM talked about multiple uses of the word sustainable. So financial sustainability and them being around to work with is really important. It also means that they have a greater understanding of why it's important to us and our customers. We've also increasingly embraced the benefits that the natural environment bring, and both Terry and Bim highlighted that. COVID has shown us that the green infrastructure can have really brilliant benefits. High quality green spaces can help with health and well-being, improve air quality and biodiversity, can support local water management, create new habitat, as well as encouraging walking and cycling, even for the cynical Phil. We find the earlier we work with our ecologists and our designers on our projects, the greater the opportunities and the better the outcomes. The final piece in the jigsaw, we realised as we started developing our new strategy that Toby's referred to a couple of years ago, and that was looking at our products and services. The built environment contributes around 40% of global carbon emissions. So we needed to really look at the legacy of the buildings that we're constructing, our products, if you like. The pandemic, the hottest spring ever this year, have also put greater focus on energy efficiency within the built environment. We've long focused on driving energy efficient buildings that minimise heat demand, but now we also need to design for hotter temperatures and minimising cooling, which actually is more expensive than heating. For us, it's about making brilliant buildings through energy efficiency. And we've just announced, as we indicated earlier, our new stretching targets that all our projects will be net zero carbon in operation by 2030. We understand that this is attractive for our customers. It'll open new markets for us and will drive business growth. As a business, using sustainability credentials to enhance your reputation, open up new markets, or improve the attractiveness of your products, it's not limited to our sector. Other sectors might look at reducing packaging, increasing recycled content, offering refill or take-back schemes to appeal to the environmentally conscious consumer. We encourage our customers to look at whole life value rather than just capital costs. And part of that too is the social return on investment that we can deliver through using, for instance, local suppliers and investing in employment and skills. On average, we spend around 75% of a project's building value within 40 miles of that project. That supports local businesses and helps develop skills and labour, particularly through apprenticeships. Now, you all know your localities really well, and you've got the added benefit of incredible insight from national and regional and more local data set that can help you be really specific about what your local area needs. Wilmot Dixon's passionate about delivering social value, and we love it when customers really understand what interventions we can support to leave a lasting legacy in your community. It's just what you get when you come to us. It's just what we do. You can find out more about us and our approach to sustainability by visiting our website and reading our new strategy, Now or Never, Our Decisive Decade. As public authorities, I'd encourage you all to build sustainability into your purchasing decisions, which will help drive demand. Please signpost the advice and guidance, especially from peer companies like ourselves and free resources such as the Supply Chain School. And please recognise, celebrate and promote success. My response to businesses in Hertfordshire today is that you may have a social, economic or environmental reason to look at sustainability in a new light. You have the ability to save money, to give back to your local environment and invest in your local community. It will help you win work, attract and retain great people and make your business more resilient. As far as I can see, there really isn't a downside to delivering a cleaner, greener and more environmentally sustainable Hertfordshire. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Julia. Viewers, how could you not respond to that by immediately changing your policies and procurement strategies and business strategies to adopt more sustainable measures? Viewers, we are going to come to you shortly. Hertfordshire Forward is a collaborative operation, and we're in danger of talking to you a lot without engaging with you and hearing what you've got to say. We're coming to you to find out how seriously you see the issues that have been raised today, and how you're responding and how immediately you're responding to those with a series of polls very shortly. But first, let's just reflect. I mean, if Wilmot Dixon can do this, then so can you. There's nothing to stop you except having the will to implement significant change. How do you get that will? How do you get that inspiration? Well, let's see if we can get some from the people to whom all this matters most, young people. And we've got a video which we hope is going to inspire you even further, which we're going to turn to now.
I think it's a real issue at the moment because there's like the ice caps melting and weather's changing quite rapidly, and about a few years ago they actually said that in 12 years time we can't stop it and it could potentially destroy the world at this rate, and because it's man-made, it's speeding up the change, which is really bad because it's already destroyed a lot of corals and stuff like that.
Stop throwing rubbish in the river. Makes me feel sad seeing all the little it can change if we lead by example. Sad about chopping down trees, which affects wildlife.
The climate crisis is not something that is going to happen. It is killing people right now. It is undeniable that the impacts of climate change are going to worsen and will cause huge instability in society, possibly even societal breakdown if we do not act. Humanity has never seen a crisis on this scale, and one which threatens our entire species. Considering the magnitude of this issue, the climate and the ecological crisis should be at the centre of every decision and policy. The government need to act now.
It is definitely a problem because places are getting hotter, others are getting colder, with now natural disasters happening in places you wouldn't expect, like the Australian wildfires.
I think climate change is an important issue because not enough people are realising that it's happening right now and that it's worsening really quickly, and that hundreds of lives are being ruined across the globe because not enough people know the extent of the situation and that it's getting really serious, but we just don't realise, and we think it's something that's happening in the future, and actually it's happening right now. Sea levels are like actively rising, visibly rising, and no one's doing anything about it because they think that it's not as bad as it actually is.
I think that climate change needs to be addressed as soon as possible, as it is destroying our planet and making it worse for future generations.
I think that climate change is an important issue that requires urgent action to prevent irreversible damage to the planet that future generations will have to inhabit.
Climate change is an important action and it needs to be taken care of as soon as possible, as not only is it affecting our planet's health, but it's also affecting our health individually, and we need to stop it as soon as possible.
I'm very concerned about climate change, partly because of all the homes that have been destroyed by natural disasters, and partly because of all the animals that are becoming endangered and extinct because of their habitats being destroyed. Climate change is not just a community challenge, it's a global competition and battle that we have to beat and tackle.
I think that climate change is a really serious issue. It affects every single one of us and we all need to do something about it. Otherwise the future could be drastically different to what we may think. We can all do something, just start small. For example, turning lights off, turning taps off.
For me, climate change has a drastic impact on both humans and the world. We are only just starting to see the consequences of it through floods, droughts, and forest fires. It scares me the way the world is going and the pressure that is being put on our generation to get us out of this mess and be put into a chaotic world. I feel it is not yet being taken seriously by many, including the government, when the impact of climate change will be irreversible in just a small number of years. It saddens me when thinking about the impact it has had on many around the world in the less affluent areas, and how many still cannot see the suffering it causes.
Climate change negatively impacts the Earth, not only us, but every living animal and plant as well. It's a product of older generations who expect us young people to fix it, along with all the other problems in society. It's not fair. Everyone wants to help the planet, but won't give up their habits that are ultimately killing it. And if we don't start to massively help this Earth, it may not be around for much longer.
Climate change is and will continue to end the lives of humans and animals. Yet, many people still feel that it's too political to address this as an emergency. In Hertfordshire, we have the privilege to speak up about this and to try and take action against climate change. I fear for what could happen if those in charge don't listen before it's too late.
It's affecting my family for one, because again, my mum's got asthma quite badly, so she struggles to breathe a lot more during summer now, because there's also the heat as well. My dad, me and my sister as well, we're all quite sensitive to the heat.
Climate change hasn't overly affected me yet. Apart from some hot summers, we haven't really known anything extreme of it, but places like Puerto Rico and places like that, they've had horrible hurricanes and storms that have been irregular, and they've destroyed like lives and opportunities, and I think we need to do something about it.
Because anytime I go on my bike or I go to the skate park on my skateboard, we just have car fumes making us cough and not feel well.
There are going to be less resources for my generation, less fuel, less materials, and it's generally just going to be a lot worse for our generation.
I believe sea levels could rise and some cities could actually be submerged underwater, and we'll also encounter major floods. Something needs to be done about climate change.
I feel climate change will impact me in the future because it means that we won't be able to use cars as much because it emits lots of carbon dioxide unless we all switch to electric cars.
It will prevent people from going outside because of the air, and most people won't be going on holiday, and all of the wildlife will probably not be able to survive, and also there will be less food because of the environment, and there will be more war.
Herts County Council should promote it more and tell people what's happening and how you can act on it to help.
Improving the littering. There's very few bins on the high street and there's a lot of litter everywhere. And maybe protecting the parks as well, because there's not a lot of them left.
A way of fixing it would be to use electric alternatives.
I also think that people should be fined if they are caught littering, as it will help future generations with littering issues.
I think County Council could do a lot to raise awareness and campaign for climate change to be noticed.
Become solar powered, walk more, make cars ain't bigger, plant more trees, build less houses, skyscrapers, recycle paper in West Sea, Hertfordshire, free waste, recycle plastic, stop burning fossil fuels.
There should be a lot more taxes on businesses who are using a lot more of these products and non-renewable energy.
By making public transport cheaper in Hertfordshire, we can reduce the local carbon emissions.
Hertfordshire County Council could do the following things to tackle climate change. For example, use less paper, plant trees, recycle more, promote public transport, educate young people about climate change, and so much more.
Take a cold heart not to respond emotionally to some of that material. But the last question was, are we listening? Let's find out, viewers, because we're going to start some polls now. We're going to see just how effective the panelists today have been in getting their messages across to you, and how effectively the young people have managed to get their views across to you. So let's start. Hopefully you're going to see the first of our 5 questions coming up on your screens now. Let's find out a little bit about how aware you are of what Hertfordshire County Council has been doing. A lot of the responses that we got from the kids in that video were around raising awareness. So let's just see how successful we've been up to now in doing that. I've got a few more seconds. We've got a fairly evenly balanced response to that. It looks to me to be, well, it's about 63% of people were aware of the Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy before today. So I'm going to turn shortly to the panel to see what they think about some of the results and what the viewers are telling us. But before we do that, let's ask the next question, which is, about your organisation and about how seriously you feel it's taking some of these issues. So has your organisation carried out risk assessments associated with climate change issues? Not too many I don't knows, which is heartening. Okay, again, a broadly positive response. So just over half of viewers' organisations, around half of viewers' organisations have carried out risk assessments associated with climate change issues. It's clearly on the radar. Okay, we'll just share that for a second so you can all see the results. I'm going to then ask you our third question, which is getting a little bit more towards the sort of positive steps that Wilmot Dixon have been taking. Have you actually developed and put in place a carbon neutral target for your organisation? How seriously are you taking these issues? It's interesting that the people who are quickest to respond tend to be those who answer positively. It's at the forefront of some people's minds. But again, we're looking at roughly about half of the audience who have a carbon neutral target in place. And now we're going to ask you about whether your organisation is delivering or planning to deliver actions to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So taking active steps. Are you feeling the effects of climate change so directly that your organisation is responding with practical measures? Okay, that's a very positive response. Pal, I'm going to come to you and ask you about the difference between the answers to those two questions, because that strikes me as quite interesting. Okay, and then our final question, viewers. What do you feel is the greatest barrier for Hertfordshire in tackling climate change? Now, if you're answering other, if you could just put your comments into the chat function. So there's a little chat button that a lot of you have been using throughout this event at the bottom of your screens. And then you can give us your insight into what you feel the barriers are, if they're not lack of awareness, lack of appetite, expertise or funding. And we'd be really pleased to hear from you. All of your responses here, the poll results, what you say, the greatest barriers you feel, are your questions and answers from the panelists will be posted on the Hertfordshire Forward website. So all of this will be played back to you, but it looks like lack of appetite and funding are the two key issues. There's probably not too much of a surprise there. Okay, panelists, did you have time to digest that? I mean, in particular, organisations with a carbon neutral target around about 53%, organisations that have carried out risk assessments regarding climate change issues around about 50%, but organisations delivering or planning to deliver actions to mitigate and adapt to climate change, 81%. What do you take from that? Julia, you've got direct expertise in a large organisation of implementing these sorts of change. How do you respond to those findings?
Well, it's really interesting. You've linked them up as I did in my head, I think. I think people, the 81% on are they planning to mitigate and adapt is saying, look, you know, we know we're going to be impacted. But I think it's just a mindset perspective change to say, do we want to be reactive or do we want to be proactive? And we've been doing an annual, quite significant, detailed analysis. We use something called a PESTLE approach, looking at political, environmental, social, legal, technical, and environmental aspects as a lens for innovation. And it's much broader than climate change, because there are so many pressures on business, whether it's, you know, for us, there are so many big infrastructure projects out there. Can we get enough trees, or can we get enough diggers, you know, to do our groundwork? So we've looked at things in the round, and I think that enables us, as I said before, if you look at something through one lens, often it benefits you in a different way. So I think being proactive and looking about the resilience of your business and all the pressures that will come to bear might help with the risk assessments. But I think it is in people's minds, and I would hope that it's a very, very small step for them to start doing more proactive planning to change their own actions and adapt to what's going to happen.
Great, thanks, Julia. Bim, if you want to pick up on any of that, do feel free. But I'd also like to put to you the answer to one of those questions in terms of barriers, where it was finance and lack of appetite, behavioural change seem to be the main obstacles. And there's a leadership role here, isn't there, for government to play, as well as the sort of practical issue of funding. And how do you respond to that finding?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. So if you take the two issues in hand, you've got finance, which is, it's the difficulty of, at a time when, it doesn't matter how successful your business is, you are still going to be worried about the outlook. Why would you spend lots of money on something that to you is a comparatively small impact, though it's part of, as everybody appreciates, a broader one? It's a sort of classic collective action problem. Therefore, that's where government has a role. And I think the government in the next couple of years is going to have to, in some shape or form, find ways of both public financing, but also private financing, corralling private financing, to make the transition both for individuals and companies much, much easier financially. Because unless you can do that, then the changes you make are small. In relation to the second point, which was the lack of willingness, again, this doesn't surprise me, because if you are an individual, if you are rational, that not only are you one person out of however many billion we are that Dr. Porter mentioned, a very big number, you're one person. You also live in a country like Britain, where the total carbon emissions of Britain, I think, are 2% of global carbon emissions, if that's right. So you think to yourself, well, I've got other things to do. I've got to sort out my job. I've got to bring up my kids. I've got to, all the normal things that are very legitimate and important things for you to worry about. Why should I spend my time doing something that may be inconvenient? So again, government has a role. How does government do that? It's to make things easy. If things are hard and expensive, people aren't going to do them, right? It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter what people say, what they virtue signal, they aren't going to do them. If things are easy and affordable, people will do them. And so that's really what government has to do. For example, what we've done on energy, Britain is pretty much the leader in renewable energy now in Europe, but barely anyone's noticed. And so people are now getting a lot more of their energy from renewables, and they don't even notice. They still press the light switch, comes on. But now it's all going to get a bit harder, because a lot of the changes now, people will start to notice. And so this is where it becomes even harder. I mean, I think the government's done a very good job, and as I say, better than pretty much most of our competitors on the first stage, in particular on energy. But now is the bit where it really becomes tricky.
Great, thanks, Bim. Indeed, and we'll come back, Julia, for your thoughts on that and your response to that. But I think let's broaden the conversation a bit. Margaret Eames-Peterson is asking about whether the university has been doing research into plastic recycling. So is there some immediate action here? Could we help support our own in-house Hertfordshire recycling of plastics company? Dr. Porter.
Yeah, I'm not aware of specific research looking directly at recycling, but we do have a materials research unit. And one of the projects I know is being worked on is looking at the degradation of plastics upon burial, particularly plastics which are labelled as compostable or biodegradable. So I'd be very happy to put you in touch with my colleagues who are working in that area. There has been a lot of work done on that. Students over the years burying various items of plastic in controlled experiments and seeing the levels of breakdown, etc. So very happy to share those details if the questioner would like to make direct contact with me.
Yeah, Margaret, you can do that through the chat function if you'd like to share your email address or
I'll drop my email address in there now, and then we
perfect.
got that. Yeah.
Thanks indeed, Dr. Porter. Teresa, Terry, feel free to pick up on any of the aspects that we've looked at so far, and to respond to the polls. But there's another issue that's being raised by a couple of our viewers. Sally Newton is asking about this in particular regarding agriculture. So we've been talking a lot about industry, but of course there's a large agricultural sector across the county. The agricultural bill is being heard again. How will the outcome affect Hertfordshire County Council processes for farmers and the rural communities going forward? And there's a related question, if you forgive me, for searching through a large number of questions we've got in from viewers today around the effects of around the county council's policies to ensure that agricultural sector is supported in efforts to become more sustainable.
Okay, I'll be truthful. I don't know what the agriculture bill has said. I haven't, I've been tied up in meetings, the usual answer, isn't it really? I'm not blaming COVID, I'm blaming meetings. I don't know the answer to that, but I can assure Sally, hello Sally, I do know who you are, that we will be engaging with the farming community. That's one of those things that's top of my list. I'm cognizant of it, and I know that our rural estates team does talk to them, but I do know we will be getting in touch very shortly. As I said, the political process, it always takes a little bit longer. The political process will run through to the end of the year, but we will be in touch. Can I just say, I really do note that people are saying they need more information, and that will be coming on our micro website, which we will be sharing. You know, it's out there now. We're posting on Facebook, etc. But I think it's important that we all try and do this together. So we're working with the district, other districts and boroughs, and that we don't give confusing messages, because, you know, let's just take COVID as a, for instance, lots of different messages coming out from different places. People are getting confused. They don't know what actually is the right answer. So I think it's very important that we do pull together and give that right information, so that they know, young people know where to go. They have a safe site, as it were, where they can go. So we're working with schools. Hearts for Learning is working with schools on criteria for children. Can I ask a question? Sort of, can I?
Of course.
Yeah, great. So around building, heavily into planning myself, used to lead at planning at St Albans. Now, we have a challenge. We have to build more homes. We're being told that. The developers come along. We're all having challenges getting our local plans through. However, builders come along and they say, we will build this. And we say, we might want affordable housing, or we want it done this way. It's not viable, is the answer that comes back. And then they go off and really ineffectively, I'm sorry to be disparaging, but this is how it feels sometimes, go off and do what they do. We can't make it sustainable because it costs too much. So this for me is a national situation, Bim, that you need to potentially pick up on. The planning laws have to deal with this question around viability. Do we have to legislate around having more sustainable building? It's difficult for districts, the local planning authorities, if they haven't got local plans, and even then it's difficult to actually make development companies build that way. So that I think is the big challenge for me. So I don't know if Phil, you've
Bim,
Okay, so the
in
answer,
responding to that, Bim, would you also perhaps address the white paper for planning and how you see, how the government sees planning evolving in the future, and how that might be developed in a way that promotes sustainability and promotes sustainable development?
well, thank you for that, because if I didn't know the answer, I'd have got it from what you just said. The answer is basically in the white paper that we've just that we're just going through, and there's a huge amount of internal discussion in the party in Parliament about it. But the absolute central point is that we are legislating, if the white paper stays the same, for the standard for houses, or building, should I say, to be that which does not need to be retrofitted to meet the 2050. So, and I use my words quite carefully there, that is not quite the same thing as saying the highest standard possible, if you see what I mean. What we're legislating for is that. I think that's a very good advanced point from where we are now, and it's something that's affordable and deliverable. Frankly, now look, I love builders, you know, they're wonderful people, but some of them are not telling the truth when they say about how unviable it is. And now, by legislating, A, they won't be able to argue about it. More importantly, the costs for the different things they have to do will go down significantly when everybody has to do it. So I'm confident that'll make a big difference. And the broader point around the white paper, which is very important, is that it is one of the main tenets is getting infrastructure funding up front. So one of the difficulties now is that you're building a development, the infrastructure funding can sort of drip in over a period of time once a certain number of houses have been sold. And that's obviously because of the cash flow of the builder. However, what we're changing that system to is where much more money comes in up front. Again, the builders may be grumpy about that. The reason how they haven't been so grumpy about it is that we know now, because of the changes we're making, we can be more confident about the plot. So you say, right, you are going to be able to develop in that zone, which is zoned for residential. You can't do the zone for commercial. You can't do the zone for retail. And therefore, it makes their life easier. Therefore, they can put in more money earlier because they've got more certainty. So that's how we're thinking of doing it, but it's not finalized yet. There's still lots of arguing about the numbers in different counties and things. But that's how it's envisaged.
Teresa, back to you to respond to that, and then I'm going to come to Julia
will
and
agree with
Dr.
me, I'm
Porter.
sure.
Yeah, let's just see. These bills, etc., take a long time to come forward, as does the Environment Bill, for instance. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big struggles we've got. And obviously for local government, the other issue is how we fund all this. We're using our reserves for COVID. So again, I don't necessarily want to say it's always about money, but we have to find other ways. And I know that other ways are being developed. Private finance, for instance, pension funds could start investing perhaps in local authorities. There's all sorts of things out there, but it's about how we just find the information. So thanks for that, Bim, and I'll be listening to what you've got to say in the future.
Thanks, Terry. Dr. Porter, I'd like you to respond to that with your thoughts on whether that's going to work. Is the planning white paper enough? Is the government's view of how we develop sustainably going to work? But also, we've got an anonymous viewer who's asked, has the COVID lockdown influenced climate change at all? And I think there's probably some interesting aspects around sort of traffic and pollution and air quality that we had an early indication that there were improvements because a lot less people were moving around. But that seems to have reversed now. Is that the case?
Yeah, I'll answer the climate one first. I mean, we globally, and I'm dredging my memory here, daily emissions were down between 17 and 25, I think, percent in April, which was obviously a peak period during the lockdown, and that's obviously a substantial decrease. I think the real issue is how we rebound from the COVID crisis once we emerge. Because if we look at the financial crisis, 2007, 2008, global emissions dropped sharply for obvious reasons, but then they bounced back very rapidly. So again, coming back to the theme of my talk in terms of opportunity, I think government and local authorities and all of us have an opportunity to emerge from the COVID crisis to a genuinely more sustainable future. But yes, I can point to numerous markers, not just CO2 emissions, but improvements in air quality, reductions in particulate emissions, most of this coming from reductions in surface transport globally. I really think the challenge is, we've learned how we can do these sorts of meetings online. We've learned to work differently. How do we take the lessons we've learned from the COVID crisis forward in terms of our sustainability goals? In terms of the white paper, obviously I've not read it. Expensive retrofitting, I can't recall if I mentioned this in my presentation, but that is you know, do we lock ourselves into high carbon emissions with buildings being built as they currently are, or resign ourselves to expensive retrofitting? Obviously, from what Bim has said, that sounds positive, that, you know, the government's thinking along the right lines. I guess my concern in the perhaps more immediate future is we have numerous development taking place right now, residential I'm talking about, as opposed to the commercial developments Julia's been referring to. Hundreds of thousands of houses coming on stream nationally without those measures in place. So we are not routinely fitting solar panels, ground source heat pump technology, all the work that BRE does so well. So, you know, I think that is a more immediate challenge, and I don't know what the answer is to that. You know, I'm not a policy maker, but, you know, I hope the white paper does what it's clearly intending to do in terms of sustainability. But my more immediate concern is the mass of housing which is currently being built and planned for the next few years, and the extent to which those changes will be delivered in time.
Thanks, Dr. Porter. Julia, you're carrying perhaps unfairly the burden of the entire development sector on your shoulders this session today. But Wilmot Dixon has vast experience in the house building sector in the past, and so what's your view of whether or not measures being taken now are going to be enough, and also, are you just a drop in the ocean? You know, is Wilmot Dixon acting alone and in the middle of an ocean of developers and contractors who are not introducing measures as significant as your own?
I think it's important just to distinguish between the players in the sector. You know, there are developers out there, you know, the big house builders, you know them, I know them. We're not one of those. They're people that buy tracts of land, will be interested in the development zones that are named in the white paper, and then will contract out, either build themselves or subcontract to build homes. The problem is that there is a fixation on energy performance certificates, which are theoretical calculations to get you through planning. They often bear no resemblance. Our own data over the last 10 years shows that the gap between what was predicted and what is in use can be between 200% and 400% worse. So that's the first thing I would suggest that the planning white paper could add to its proposals, to make a much greater focus in the way that we've seen the London plan do, a focus on actual performance in use. And that's the way that when we get the affordability issue highlighted as it's not affordable, well, no, it won't be affordable, because you won't be able to build stuff and walk away and leave the poor householder with very high bills. I'm concerned that actually the planning white paper only has about half a page on sustainability. It has about 4 pages on beauty, and it has a lot of pages on what's stopping the planning process, which frankly is a lot of red herrings. So I hope it gets seriously reviewed and improved before it starts going through the governmental process. And I'd like to see it much more joined up. So the Future Home Standard that was consulted on some time ago, frankly, if that was implemented as drafted, would see us going backwards, not forward. So it's not future in any way, shape or form. For those of us that want to see high performing buildings that stop people going into fuel poverty, that's absolutely key. We'd also like to see, and you know, I declare an interest as the next local authority. I wasn't a planning officer, I was in director of environment, but had planning within my portfolio. You know, we've got 400 and odd local authorities have now declared a climate emergency, and I'd like the planning reforms to enable the local planning authorities to have the option to demand even higher standards when they've declared a climate emergency or net zero ambitions, so that they're in control of their own standards. And, you know, in terms of the cost thing, I mean, we talked about encouraging our customers to look at whole life. Developers are not interested in the ongoing costs. That is an issue. But I think if we can just start blowing the myths out of the water. The UK Green Building Council, I'll say that again so I don't have to type it in the chat. The UK Green Building Council in the last month or so have published a report that indicated exactly what Phil was saying. If you build for future standards, I think it was an additional 3% on the cost of a new build. But actually, when you take into account the fact you haven't got to pay to retrofit, and that you'll get higher sales, better residual value, all the other benefits, actually the cost benefit is a no-brainer. So sorry to be a bit controversial. I have scars from many previous lives, but I hope that some of those points resonate.
Absolutely. Don't be sorry in any way. You've been blowing myths out of the water, and that's what we've been seeking to do all morning. So thank you very much indeed for your contribution there, Julia. And I'm going to let you have the last word because we're at 11:32. Our time is up. So I'd just like to thank our panel for the practical and positive steps that have been outlined today in what we can do to make our communities more sustainable. And the last 6 months has engendered in many of us a feeling of sort of helplessness of events being out of control and impacts being unavoidable. So it's really refreshing to hear today of so many ways in which you, the stakeholders in Hertfordshire, can influence the direction and duration and impact of some of these terrible tendencies. And how starkly they've been outlined for us by the children of Hertfordshire in that video this morning. So thank you, panel, for instilling some positivity and perhaps even some optimism and best of all, a sense of agency. You know, there are things we can do and we can do them now. If we were all together now in a room, you'd be listening to applause ringing out across the stage as you stood up from your chairs to leave the stage. So close your eyes and imagine it now as our audience, on our audience's behalf. I take the opportunity to thank you, Councillor Teresa Heritage of Hertfordshire County Council, and thank you, Bim Afalami MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, and thank you, Dr. Phil Porter of the University of Hertfordshire, and thank you, Julia Barrett from Wilmot Dixon. And of course, thanks to you out there in Zoomland, our probing and challenging and collaborative audience. We've got lots of questions hanging in the Q&A function, which we'll circulate to our panel after this event and ask them to respond to by email. And we'll be posting those responses through the Hertfordshire Forward website, so you can catch up with those and a video of this session later on. Thank you, viewers, for contributing so much to the discussion with the poll results as well. It's a discussion that is going to continue. On that website, you can also register for the next webinar in this series on the 26th of November, when we'll be discussing diversity and equality in recovery. But until then, from our panel, from me and from everyone at Hertfordshire Forward, thank you and good afternoon.